Hello, and welcome back to Joan's English Academy. My name is Joan, and I'm so happy to have you here. If this is your first time here, welcome. This is a place where we learn English in a simple, practical, and comfortable way, without making you feel like you need to memorize a whole grammar book before you can speak. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about 7 English grammar mistakes you might be making without even knowing it. And don't worry, I'm not going to make this complicated. I'm going to show you these mistakes in a way that's easy to understand, so you can recognize them when you hear them, and, more importantly, avoid making them when you speak. So, if you're ready, let's learn together. And before we begin, if you're enjoying the lessons here at Joan's English Academy, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel grow, and it lets me know that you want more lessons like this. All right, let's get into today's lesson. Mistake number 1, she don't. Let's start with a mistake that is very common. Sometimes, when we're talking about another person, especially when we're speaking quickly, we use don't when we should use doesn't. Here's the simple rule. When you're talking about he, she, or it, use doesn't. When you're talking about I, you, we, or they, use don't. That's really all you need to remember for now. And here's something important. When you're learning English, don't only memorize the individual words. Pay attention to the little patterns, because sometimes it's not the big words that make your English sound incorrect. It's the tiny words in between them. And that's exactly what we're going to keep looking at in this lesson. Mistake number 2. I didn't went. Here's another one I hear quite often. Someone is talking about something that happened in the past, so they know they need to use didn't. But then they also change the next word into the past. And that's where the mistake happens. Once you use didn't, you don't need to put the next verb in the past again. Think of didn't as already telling us that we're talking about the past. So after it, keep the next word simple. This may feel strange at first, especially if you're translating from your first language. But once you start hearing the correct pattern more often, it becomes much easier. Mistake number 3. He have. This one is small, but it can make a big difference. Sometimes we use have when we're talking about he or she. But with he, she, and it, we normally use has. So here's the little pattern I want you to remember. I have, you have, we have, they have, but he has, she has, it has. You don't need to memorize a complicated grammar rule. Just remember that he, she, and it go with has. And once again, this is why listening to English is so important. The more you hear these patterns correctly, the more natural they begin to feel. Mistake number 4. I am agree. This is a really interesting one because it often happens when we're translating directly from our first language. You know what you want to say. You know the word agree. But you build the sentence using the structure of your own language, and that's when English can sound a little strange. In English, we simply say, I agree. We don't need to put am before it. And this is one of the biggest lessons I want you to take from today's class. Don't always translate English word for word. Sometimes, the English way of expressing an idea is completely different from the way you would say it in your own language. The more English you listen to, the more you'll begin to recognize these natural patterns. A little reminder before we continue. You know, There was a time when I thought the best way to improve my English was to make sure I never made a mistake. I thought I had to get every sentence right. So sometimes I would know exactly what I wanted to say, but I would stop myself because I was thinking too much about whether my grammar was correct. And honestly, that can be exhausting, because when you're constantly thinking, am I saying this correctly? Did I use the right word? Is this grammar right? You can become so focused on avoiding mistakes that you forget to actually communicate. And maybe you've experienced this too. Maybe you've been in a situation where you wanted to speak English, but you suddenly became very conscious of yourself. You knew what you wanted to say, but you were afraid that someone might notice your mistake. So you stayed quiet. And I want you to understand something. You cannot become comfortable speaking a language by being afraid of making mistakes. You have to allow yourself to make some mistakes. That's how you learn. Think about when you were learning how to write. You didn't pick up a pen one day and immediately write perfectly. You practiced. You made mistakes. Someone corrected you. You tried again. And eventually, something that once required a lot of concentration became completely normal. Learning English works the same way. So please don't wait until your English is perfect before you start speaking. Speak while you're learning. Make mistakes while you're learning. Correct yourself. Try again. And keep going. Because every time you discover that you've been saying something incorrectly, that's not a failure. That's progress. Now, let's continue, because there are still 3 more mistakes I really want you to know about. Mistake number 5. I have 25 years. Now this one is very common among English learners, and honestly, I completely understand why people say it. In some languages, the way you express your age is closer to saying that you have a certain number of years. But English doesn't express age that way. When we talk about our age, we use I am. So this is something you simply need to get used to. Don't think of it as English being difficult. Think of it as English having its own way of expressing certain ideas. Every language does this, and the sooner you stop trying to translate every sentence directly, the easier English becomes. Mistake number 6. I am going to home. This one is very small, but it's worth paying attention to. When we're talking about going home, we normally say going home. We don't need to before home. And this is interesting because we do use to with many other places. So you might be tempted to think that because you're going somewhere, you must always use to. But home is different. It's one of those little patterns you simply need to become familiar with. And that's why I always encourage English learners to listen carefully to everyday English. Don't just listen for the big words. Listen to the little words too. Those little words are often doing more work than you realize. Mistake number 7, confusing since and for. Let's finish with this one that can be confusing even when you already speak quite a lot of English. Both since and for are connected to time, but we don't use them in exactly the same way. Here's the easiest way to remember it. For tells us how long something has continued. Since tells us when it started. That's it. So when you're thinking about a length of time, think for. When you're thinking about the starting point, think since. And don't worry if you've been mixing these two up. It's a very common mistake, And once you understand the difference, you can start correcting it in your everyday English. Now, I want you to remember something. Making grammar mistakes does not mean you're bad at English. You're learning a language, and mistakes are a normal part of that process. The important thing is to notice your mistakes and learn from them. And you don't have to fix everything at once. If you recognized yourself in some of the mistakes we talked about today, choose one or two and focus on those first. Start listening for them. Start noticing how English speakers use those expressions, and slowly you'll begin to use them correctly without having to stop and think about the rule, because that's really the goal. We don't want you speaking English while mentally searching through a grammar book in your head. We want these patterns to become natural, and that takes time, listening, practice, and patience. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Notice them, learn from them, keep speaking. That's how your English gets better. If this lesson helped you, like this video and subscribe to Joan's English Academy for more simple, practical English lessons. And remember, you don't have to know every grammar rule to speak good English. Sometimes you just need to understand the little things that you've been getting wrong and start doing them differently. I'll see you in the next lesson.